All right. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, evening, depending on where you are joining from. I welcome you all to our very first webinar for this session. And this is for comprehensively preparing for the GRE. And our speaker today is Ahmad Faraz Badar. He's a SSGSS scholar from 2019, and he will be joining the University of Wisconsin Medicine for a master's program this fall. So Faraz appeared for the GRE last year, and he was in the audience in a similar webinar last year. And he went on to score 336 out of 340 when he appeared for the GRE. And this is why he is on the other side and delivering a webinar for you. I hope that you will make the best use of this webinar and prepare well for the GRE, and then which will eventually help you secure better admits than that you would get without appearing for the GRE. With that, Faraz, the floor is all yours.
Right, so, good morning or evening to everyone present here today. My name is Ahmad Faraz Badar, and I will be holding this session on comprehensively preparing for the GRE. And before I would like to begin, I would just like to thank everyone at SSGSA for giving me this opportunity to present here and for also helping me a lot while I was preparing for my own GRE exam. And a special thanks to, of course, Umar Khurshid Bhai, who took this webinar last year. And it's these type of events through SSGSA that really help you and motivate you to do well in these sort of exams. So I really hope that everyone would listen closely and take away something from this webinar so that they can also succeed. And just before I begin, for people who are curious, so I scored a 336 out of 340 in the GRE. I scored a 167 on the verbal section, 169 on the quant section, and a 5.0 on the writing section. So with that out of the way, let's begin then. So the very first question that you should be asking yourself is, what is the GRE? Right now, of course, an even bigger question that you should be asking yourself if you're going to take or going to apply for admissions abroad is, should I take the GRE? So let's just look at this right before we begin. So what is the GRE? I'm quite familiar. I'm quite sure that you would all be familiar with what the GRE is. So the GRE stands for the Graduate Record Examination, and it's an about 4-hour exam, and it consists of 3 sections. So we have the analytical writing section, the verbal reasoning section, and the quantitative section. There will also be an unscored section. So this is just a section which it's going to be either a verbal or quantitative section. It's just a section which will not be scored. We don't have to worry about this sort of thing. We just have to take the exam and not worry about this sort of thing. So we'll be going through all these things one by one. And if there's any question which anyone has, then they can put it in the chat box, and later on, once we finish, we'll go through all the questions. So with that, I think, I guess that's pretty much what the GRE is. The more important question though is, should I take the GRE? So that's a question that depends on a lot of factors, and it's very important to first tackle this question before you actually begin preparing. So it depends upon what your graduate program is. Now, the GRE is mostly used for universities in the US. There are also some universities in other countries which also have a GRE requirement or consider the GRE. But it varies very, very much according to different programs in different countries. So the very first thing that you should do if you're planning to take the GRE is to research your program requirements and see whether the GRE is required or not. Now, with that, there are some recent trends with the GRE. We see 3 types of things with the GRE, which is some universities say that the GRE is absolutely required. You need to take the GRE. So for those programs, you have to take it. But a lot of universities also put down GRE requirement optional or waived. So in that sort of case, you can submit your GRE score, but you can still submit your application if you're not able to write the GRE. And there are some universities which don't consider it at all. So they actually put that on their program site. So again, it's very important for you to research your program requirements before you commit to preparing for the GRE. Now, there's also the commitment, which we have to mention. Preparing for the GRE takes about 2 months of time, no less than 2 months, and I would suggest no greater than 2 months, because then you start forgetting things. So there is a time commitment, and there's also the cost of the exam. So with all these factors in mind, you really have to decide whether you should take the GRE or not. But bottom line is that, in my opinion, you should take the GRE if it is either required or optional for your graduate program, so that you can strengthen your application. It's no secret that master's applications have become really, really competitive over the past few years. And so if you feel that there's some part of your application which you think is lacking in some way or another, then if the GRE is required or optional, then taking it would definitely strengthen your application and make you stand out. And these sort of things really do play a role later on when you apply for funding and these sort of things. They want the best qualified candidate, and this is one of those tests that they've been traditionally looking at. So there is, to any exam, there is some sort of preparation approach that you take. So this was my approach to preparing for the GRE, which was to think of preparing for the GRE as a part of preparing for grad school. You see, in graduate school, you'll be doing a lot of reading. You'll be reading a lot of papers. You'll be reading a lot of papers. You'll be doing a lot of critical thinking. You'll be doing a lot of data analysis sort of things. You'll be doing a lot of writing. You'll be definitely doing a lot of writing. And you'll be doing a lot of thinking and critical reasoning, try to convince your lab members, your supervisor. And so there are a lot of skills that you need to develop to actually succeed in grad school. And the GRE tests you on these sort of things. So instead of thinking it as a sort of exam that you just have to pass, you should think of it as you're preparing for your graduate school journey. You're preparing for all these reading and reading comprehension, quantitative skills, writing skills. You're preparing for all of these. And that really helps in your preparation, because if you know that what you're learning, what you're preparing for is actually useful, then that really helps in your mindset and motivation to prepare for this exam. Now, coming to the actual preparation of the exam, there are broadly two approaches. And this I'm quoting from a book which I read about this. So there is the Hunter approach to solving questions in the GRE. In this approach, you dive straight in towards the questions, look at the options, try to jump through, maybe there's a reading passage. So jump through the exact paragraph where that question might be from, hunt down the answer. That's a fast-paced approach. You're using shortcuts to get to the answer. And that's pretty important because you do have a time limit. There's also the scholar approach. Now, quite aptly named, the scholar approach has you reading through a passage and reading through a question, reading carefully, looking into the details, and then answering the question in one go with a very informed outlook. So that is something which I tend to lean towards, but it's also true that that approach takes a lot of time. So if anything, this shows that no one strategy to prepare for the GRE works. You need to have a combination of different strategies. You need to have that scholarly approach of analyzing a question in such a way that, okay, you're understanding everything that is being said or being asked. But you also have to have that Hunter approach. You should have some shortcuts and tricks included in your answering strategy that helps you keep everything in time. And that's definitely true for real life as well. You can take the long approach, but you also have to look for these shortcuts. You have to look for some subtle ways in which you can do things quickly. So we'll be looking at these type of approaches while we are preparing for the GRE. So as I had mentioned, there are different sections. So let's start off with the verbal section. So verbal section, let's look at the preparation for the verbal section. So to prepare for the verbal section, the best sources for preparation are the GRE official guide, that's the official general test guide, and the official verbal reasoning guide. And there are some very good verbal question strategies which are available online on this There's a site called RegMat. So they have very good verbal strategies, how to answer questions and things like that. So that is a very good resource for preparing for verbal. Now, Manhattan Prep is a book which a lot of people have tried for verbal, and it's quite infamous for the fact that it has very, very and unnecessarily difficult words when it comes to the verbal section. The quantitative section for the Manhattan book is very good. It's highly recommended, but the verbal section, it's not as good, I would say. So you should stick to the official ETS material. That is, of course, the best. They are making they're making the exam, so they are making the exact same questions. And other sources, you can do them, but you can do them later. This is something which is more important. Now, coming to strategies for attempting verbal type questions, because verbal reasoning questions, it's something which a lot of people find difficulty in. So you have to think of some strategies to do well in this sort of section.
Everyone in the audience, I please request you to mute yourself. Since you are like already in college, I hope I won't have to remind about professional etiquettes of joining a Zoom call.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. So we were going over strategies for the verbal section. So one of the strategies is to simplify your sentences as you're reading along. And all these are like a part of those RegMath strategies, which I was talking about earlier. So simplifying sentences and actually understanding the purpose and meaning of the words and sentences that are being written down is very important. You should be able to understand why is an author writing this particular sentence? Why are they telling this information? Or why are they using this particular word? These sort of things, looking at keywords like although and however and because, these sort of things dramatically shift the meanings of sentences. And so that's very important if you're preparing for the GRE, writing and practicing verbal style questions. But it's also very important if you're reading academic papers and things like that. So it's important to practice different types of strategies and see what works for you for this verbal section. Now, you should implement these type of strategies slowly. Not everyone can read very quickly and have 100% comprehension from the get-go. You have to develop the skill over time, but it's very important to understand what you're reading, to have good reading comprehension, right? So that's something which you can develop over time, and by practicing strategies, this sort of thing helps. And don't get stuck too much on a question. Sometimes people read questions, they see lots of options and they get hung up on one option and they get stuck that, okay, it could be this one or this one. So you should try not to get stuck on these things. Use some logical reasoning or deduction to figure out which answer could be the correct one, but don't spend too much time on it. If you're not able to get it, it's okay. You can skip a question. There are questions which are difficult like that, but you should have a time division when you're attempting and practicing for the GRE. A time division is basically just a preset idea or goal that you have in mind that, okay, the different types of questions which I'm going to see in the exam, which I'm going to see in the section, I'm going to spend this much time on each type of question. So for the verbal section, I followed this type of time division. For reading comprehension, RC, I'm spending 15 minutes for those type of questions. For SC, the sentence completion questions, I'm spending around 6 minutes. And for the sentence equivalence type questions, the SE questions, I'm spending around 4 minutes. So I have this thing already set with me that while I'm writing the exam, if I see that I'm doing the reading comprehension questions, I've hit the 15-minute mark, I'm taking more time than that, then I should move on to the other questions, and then try to see, okay, if I can get back to that question later. So this really helps you not get stuck, to keep going, and this sort of confidence and ability to get things done is very important when you're in anything really. So I just want to show a couple of examples of what I was talking about with strategies. We won't really be solving any questions. I'm just trying to show what I mean by strategies. So any reading comprehension type of passage will have some particular features to it. because these are all examples of academic writing, right? So you will always have some sort of sentence that will have an introductory sentence to it. There will be some parts of the passage which will define some sort of process, or they'll be giving facts or background information. But all sorts of passages will have some sort of challenge or main idea to them. Because after all passages are written by some author. The author has some main idea that they want to convey. So they will try to put that in somewhere. And usually there will be one sentence which will have some sort of information about what conventional views are on a particular topic. So in any field, whether it be science or politics or economics or anything, it will have some sort of conventional views to them, the standard view or the conventional view. And most academic writing is kind of like this. Either an author is trying to support the conventional view, or they are trying to challenge it. And that's kind of like the main ideas of passages. So understanding the entire structure of a passage is very important while you're reading it. That's what I meant by understanding the meaning and the purpose of sentences. And this sort of structure is very common, and this is seen a lot in the GRE. So here are a couple of more examples. So when a passage is written, an author is writing something, the author obviously has his own idea. That's the author's idea. But then again, while they're presenting their idea, they will also present the ideas of other people. So they will use someone else's idea, and they will use that to either support their ideas, that would be a form of supporting your idea, or they will be using someone else's idea to as a sort of counter argument or as an attack. So you can see this sort of thing here, that in a passage that was written, someone else's idea was presented, and then the author put forth a counter argument. Another type of thing would be that someone else's idea is presented and it's used as a support to the author's idea. There are also other examples. There's something called a concession. So someone else's idea is presented, and initially good things are said about that idea, that, okay, this idea is very good. But from the structure of the sentence that's used, you can tell that that it's a sort of concession that, okay, there was something good about them, but it was only one good thing. There are a lot of bad things coming later on. So you can see from the second example's sentence structure, there's someone and he does present a quantity of examples. So the way they've structured it, he does present a quantity of examples. That's showing that, okay, this person does do something good, but he does do it. That does kind of signifies that, okay, this was a one-off thing. So these type of structures are things that you have to try to identify while you're reading. And it's really a skill. It's a really useful skill for graduate school, for everything. And so developing this is very important. So I hope this type of examples do help in your actual preparation. And you'll obviously see more types of things when you actually prepare for the GRE, or if you're preparing for it right now. I do want to show a couple of more examples. So this is a sentence completion type example. And there are some strategies to do this sort of thing. So the strategy over here would be to not look at the answer choices to begin with. Do not look at the answer choices, read the sentence and try to fill in the blanks yourself first. So you should try to fill in the blanks with your own words. And after that, you should then look at the answer choices and then try to see, okay, the words which you put into the blank, are they there in the options or not? And usually one of them will be in the options. So what you have to look for to come up with your own words is to look at contrasts and shifts in a sentence. A sentence is a complicated structure. There are a lot of things which people can do to make a sentence complicated, but also very informative at the same time. So proper use of punctuation really shifts the meaning of a sentence, and different words do have an effect. So here you see there is this word although. The sentence starts with although. So when you start a sentence with although someone has some type of reputation, you immediately know that the second part of the sentence is going to be that, okay, whatever was the reputation here, it's something completely different in the next part. So these type of contrasts are what you have to look for, and that's part of preparing for the GRE. And just to show another example, that strategies can be different. So this is a sentence equivalence type question. So in this type of question, you have to fill in the blank with 2 of the answer choices that are available to you. So there are 6 options. You have to choose 2 of them that when put into the sentence, result in a sentence which has similar meaning or the same meaning. So in this type of question, the strategy would be to look at the answer choices first and try to figure out what those different pairs are, pairs of words that mean the same thing. So in the previous type of question, we were not looking at the answer choices first, but in this question, we are. So this subtlety in different strategies really helps. In this type of question, first you look at the different answer choices. You have words like deceit and acumen and duplicity. So this deceit and duplicity, these 2 kind of mean the same thing. They both mean something to do with deceit. And you have this word acumen and shrewdness. So these 2 words also mean kind of the same thing, something which is smart or clever or something like that. So finding pairs of words and then putting them into the sentence blank, that is kind of like the strategy for these type of questions. So it's important to have this overview of strategies and practice them. But while you were looking at these sort of questions, you would have realized that there's a lot of difficult vocabulary that comes along with the verbal section. So that's where vocab and reading preparation comes in. So for vocabulary, it's quite straightforward. There is this Magoosh 1000 words GRE flashcards app, which is there online. It's free. So just get that. There's also this vocab builder app. It's pretty much all you need. There are some high frequency words that appear in the GRE. So you just practice them every day. And that's pretty much it, really. While you're practicing, you'll find a list of encountered words. So while you're doing problems, you might come across some difficult words. So maintaining your own list is also good. And honestly, all different vocabulary practicing apps, flashcard apps, they're all the same, really. They all have the same words. It's a different interface. So honestly, any app works for you, but you should stick to one app and just do all the words in it. You'll end up having to practice around 1000 words, and that's consistent with pretty much all the word lists that are out there. Now, how to memorize words is actually part of it, right? So you can use mnemonics. So mnemonics are pretty much like easy or simple patterns which you use to memorize words, and they can be really helpful. There are also something called word clusters. So that's when you take a collection of different words which all happen to mean the same thing. So they're all similar. And the English language is quite diverse in this. There are pretty much like around 20 words, which you'll find 20 words which mean the same thing. There are 20 words to explain the expression of criticism. There are 20 words which would explain the feeling of happiness. So there are a lot of words like that. So some people clump words together and try to memorize them that way, but that's a lot of work. It's quite easy to get carried away with vocabulary practice. So you shouldn't get carried away with that. Just if you are practicing for more than 30 minutes a day on vocabulary, I'd say you're getting carried away. So there are a whole lot of other things which are there to the GRE. So this is just one part of it. And I know a lot of us are not familiar with many of the more difficult English words, which might be more common in the academic world. So it does seem daunting, but it's just a part of the preparation, right? Now, a lot of people do ask, okay, should we be reading to prepare ourselves for the GRE? And I would say that yes, reading is good, but you should be reading the right sort of material. So you should be reading the sort of things that a typical graduate student would read. So the reading should be GRE level. So the best source for that would be The Economist. The Economist is a great source for GRE and high level type of academic reading, which you can see from the style. There will be a complex structure of narration. There will be different ideas and shifts in whatever those ideas are, arguments, counter arguments, and that sort of thing. So you don't actually have to buy The Economist. You can look for old issues and free archives of The Economist online, and you can do that for pretty much any newspaper. So there are a lot of good newspapers the New York Times, the New Yorker. There's a very good site called Arts and Letters Daily. So you don't really have to get the latest version. You can read some version which is 3 years old or something. What matters is that, okay, you're getting some exposure to reading, and that really helps sometimes, right? Novels are not that helpful in my opinion. Novels are good, but first you have to find a novel which has GRE level of content to it. And second thing is that it does take a lot of time to go through novels. So for the amount of effort that you have to put into it, it's much better to just read an article of The Economist. That's much faster, and you get a wealthier set of reading knowledge from that. So how much time you should spend on that? I would say spend about practice about 20 words a day and incorporate a wide variety of reading. And as far as reading is concerned, you should probably only spend about 2 hours per week on reading. You shouldn't spend too much time on reading. What you should be spending time on is preparing for the GRE, preparing for the actual questions, practicing them and taking practice tests. This is something on the side. You can take short notes while reading, and it's just practice, right? So this is something which we're doing to hone our skills, but the actual preparation is the GRE questions. But it's good to have these sort of things in mind. Now, coming to quantitative preparation, a lot of us in school have had a good math background. So it's good to review the different types of quantitative type questions that you get, basic arithmetic, geometry, and probability and statistics. And so it's nothing more complicated than 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade level. So it's very few things, maybe some obscure probability thing might be a bit more advanced, but it's all limited to that high school range. So where it gets complicated is that you have these questions, they're quite basic and simple, but you also have very little time to do them. So the best resources for practicing for these quantitative questions is to, of course, the GRE original guide, that is the best source, and the GRE quantitative reasoning guide. These are the absolute best sources because they come from ETS themselves. Now, the Manhattan Prep book, that's really great for the quantitative section. Not so great on the verbal section, but it's great for preparing for quantitative type questions because it has a large number of questions on different topics. And so if you practice from this book, you'll really be able to get a good hold on your quantitative skills. Now, I am aware that there are some programs out there that require really high quant scores. There are these business programs and computer science programs. They ask for 165 plus or 167 plus in the quant section. So for these type of programs, it is important to learn a few advanced topics when it comes to the quant section. So usually in every GRE exam that you take, you will have 1 or 2 advanced questions that will be there. And so if you want to get into those, then after completing this sort of work, you can move on to sites like GRE Prep Club and GMAT Club. So they have special advanced topic sections. So you can look at them. They'll have things like, there are lots of the things that they do in advanced GRE, like determine the number of prime numbers or divisibility things. So yes, it's something simple, but these classify under advanced topics when it comes to the GRE. Now, the strategies are pretty much the same, that you have to try to practice in timed settings. It's very important to do that because this is a 4-hour exam. So if you practice for only half an hour, then you're not really feeling or getting used to how it is. You have to try to practice in extended sessions of time, and you have to take it under the same exact conditions. So while you're preparing for the GRE, prepare in a way, or practice your questions in a way that you are doing it in those exact timed settings. And of course, for math type problems, you have to try to use some shortcuts or some examples, and that's a part of the review process that you do for the different types of questions that you're looking for the quant section. This is where the hunter strategy comes in, that, okay, we are looking for some shortcuts for these math problems because it's something simple, but it's also something which can be done faster. And there is a very good thing which you can do, which is known as the 30-second rule. So the 30-second rule for quant questions is something like, if you are taking this test and you come across a question and you're not able to figure out how to do this question within the first 30 seconds, then you should skip this question and do it later. Because of course, there are some questions which do require some thinking, and you don't want to get stuck on one particular question because you are on a time budget here. You can't spend 2 or 3 minutes on one question trying to figure out how it's done. It will take up a lot of time, and it will take up a lot of time from the easier questions, which you could have done within a minute. So it's important to follow this type of structure, a time division, because it's important to stay on track. So for the quant section, I was following this type of time division. You don't necessarily have to follow it. You can make your own division. But what I was doing was, for the first 10 questions that I was getting in a section, I would spend around 10 minutes on it. And for the next 10 questions, which would be a bit harder, I would spend 15 minutes. So, and the rest of the time was for checking. So, or whatever those questions that I had skipped. So in every section, there are 20 questions. So you get around 30 or 35 minutes for each section. So you have to spend around 1 or 1.5 minutes for each question. So saving time on some questions early on can really help you figure out those harder questions later. And that's how the quant section works, that it's mostly time-based. You have to look for those shortcuts. Now, I am showing one example over here. So I just want to point out some things which you can find in a GRE style quant question as opposed to a regular math problem. So here they're actually looking for your critical reasoning skills and quantitative reasoning skills. If you look at this question, they have a lot going on over here. It seems like a simple problem where some tickets are there and they're being sold, but look at some of the things that they're doing. The tickets are being sold not at a particular price. They have a range of prices in which they're being sold. A lot of, some tickets are being sold in some range, some tickets are being sold in some other price range. And look at the quantity that they want you to calculate. They want you to find, they don't want you to find the number of tickets. They want you to find the arithmetic mean of the prices of the tickets. So that's an extra level of calculation that you have to do. So reading the wording of the question is very important. And to be able to understand that quickly, that's a skill that you develop over time when you're practicing for this exam. You use different examples and extreme possibility type things and shortcuts to, do this thing quickly. So finding the average of something, that's a simple process. Everyone knows how to do that, but there are ways to do it more quickly, shortcuts, if you will. So knowing those sort of things, practicing them, these sort of strategies, that's a part of your preparation. And this is something that makes the difference between a good GRE score and a very, very good GRE quantitative score. So I'll move on to the issue and argument essay part of the GRE. So the GRE starts off with 2 essays that you have to write, 30 minutes each. One of them is the issue essay, and the other is the argument essay. And in my opinion, the issue and argument essay are very important. The essay section is important because it is the very first section that appears in the GRE. And if you are not able to do it, well, suppose you're writing it and you run out of time, for instance, then that sort of thing does have a negative impact on your mindset for the rest of the exam. So doing well on it, being prepared for it actually is really, really important. So I'll talk a bit about the preparation for this type of essay that you have to do. So the first thing you have to do, you have to follow a template. So a template is just basically a structure of how you're going to arrange your paragraphs and what are you going to talk about in each paragraph, right? So there are very good templates online. If you go to GregMat, there's a site, you can get a very good example template and just stick to one example template, right? The good thing about these essays for the GRE is that ETS has an official list of essays that they have on their website. It's a list of about 50 or 75 essays, and those are the only essay prompts that can ever appear for the GRE. So you literally have the entire list of essay questions that can ever be asked. Now, the thing is, you're not going to practice all of them. So, but it's good to practice some of them. I would suggest practicing about 7 or 8 or 10 essays by yourself, because that gives you the confidence to actually be able to write an essay over there in the actual exam center. So If you feel uncomfortable with typing, you should practice a bit of typing, because it is important to write a lot of words. Like it's mostly seen that if you type more than 550 words, then you get a good score. Word count does matter sometimes, but you have to be careful with spelling as well. So you have to have a time division with this sort of things. So I've shown the sort of time division which I was following. And the structure is quite simple, really. For every essay, you just have an introductory paragraph, a conclusion paragraph, and in between, you will have 2 or 3 body paragraphs. So I'm spending about 5 minutes reading the prompt and writing that small introduction, and then 5 minutes for each of the remaining body paragraphs, and then the conclusion in about 3 or 5 minutes. So you should have this sort of structure at the back of your mind, because you don't want to be over there thinking about how I'm going to write this essay. You need to have this plan already with you. That's part of the strategy that we discussed. And then when you have something like this, it makes it easier for you to actually implement it there in the exam. So the strategy is to just follow the template and follow your time division. And the special thing about the issue essay is that in the issue essay, they're asking for your opinion. They're asking for your view. So you have to commit to a position depending on what that prompt is, right? So you can be either for the prompt, or you can be against the prompt. You can be supporting it or be against it, or whatever the case. But there are sometimes you have to be careful with this. You have to properly read and understand what the question is asking. Sometimes they will ask you, here is an issue. Give us your commit to one position and explain about that. Sometimes they will ask you, okay, weigh both sides equally and then give your opinion on the issue. Sometimes they will say, okay, commit to one position, choose either for or against, but at the same time, discuss the possible limitations or shortcomings of your view. So it's quite a nuanced view. So you have to look at this and carefully read what the question is actually asking you, and then organize your paragraphs accordingly. If you have that sort of not strongly agree, but the sort of agree, but also slightly disagree type of essay, then you could spend 2 body paragraphs strongly committing to your position, and then spend 1 paragraph highlighting some of the disadvantages or limitations of your position. If you have a completely strongly agree type of view, then you can spend all paragraphs strongly committing to your position. So that's something which you have to carefully look into. What is the question actually asking? And you should have this time division. You should pay close attention to the wording of the question. And essay feedback is very, very important. It's very important to have someone, some peers, some friends, or whoever to help you with your essay once you've done writing, to get an outside opinion. That was, for me personally, it was the most important thing while I was preparing for my GRE and preparing for my essay writing. It really was helpful. There were other people who were also preparing the GRE as well, along with me. So we would send each other our essays, we would give feedback, and that was really helpful. Having a sort of group in which you can support each other through feedback and these sort of things, that's really important. And having something like this, especially here, it's quite easy. You can always ask any one of us. You can ask me personally if you want feedback on your essay, because this sort of thing is important. And this was really one of the game changers, I should say, that it gave me the confidence in my writing that a lot of us don't write too much. So it really gave me the confidence to do well in this section. And that really does trickle on. Like, well, if you do your essay section really well, then you have the confidence to go through your the remaining sections in the GRE and do well on them as well. Now, speaking on the argument essay, it's pretty much the same thing. There will be a template. There will be some minor changes in the content of these paragraphs, but the overall structure is usually the same in this GregMat template. You're free to follow any template you like. This is the sort of template which I was following. So there's this official list of prompts. You can look at them, and you should, again, practice your typing to write about 550 words or around that, and practice a lot of essays while you're actually preparing for the GRE. Now, some specific things to the strategies for this type of essay. So for the argument essay, you're given a situation and you're supposed to analyze that situation and present arguments or for or against that's well, not for or against, arguments about whatever conclusion is being presented to you. So a situation would be presented to you, you'll be given some evidence and some conclusion will be drawn from that. Some decision will be drawn from that. And so you will have to analyze what assumptions, what evidences have been used for this argument and basically critically analyze this argument. Whatever conclusion is being drawn, is it good or not? What sort of assumptions or evidence could be required, or what sort of questions could be asked, and that sort of thing. So practicing for these essays, you really have to look at the sample essays which are there and see how it's been attempted over there. What sort of critical questions are being asked to analyze a particular situation. So you can find these online in different, usually the verbal guides will have a writing section to them as well. So the point is that you should practice writing these essays in a in the time format. You have 30 minutes to write one essay. And so you should try to practice in those settings. And again, you should have this time division with you at the back of your mind, how you're going to approach this essay. And you should pay close attention to the wording as well. And finally, essay feedback, as I've highlighted, is very, very important. It's something that really changed essay writing for me. And initially, I was quite insecure about my writing. I wasn't quite sure whether I'm writing well or not. So getting feedback and reading other people's essays, seeing how they write, that really helps. And that's the part of SSG essay, right? Like we are all here to work together and help each other in these sort of things and provide feedback to, succeed. So coming to practice tests are very, very important. I cannot stress how important practice tests are. You should aim to write about 7 or 8 practice tests. So it's really important because you know that this exam is 4 hours long. So initially you might be doing well, but once you enter that 3-hour mark and start approaching that 4-hour mark, that fatigue starts getting to you. So practicing the actual practice tests in that time 4-hour setting is very important, because that will help you prepare to stay concentrated and focused for long hours at a stretch. Kind of like how you have to be in graduate school. You have to stay focused for long periods of time. So here are some of the resources that you can use for practicing for the GRE. The first thing that you should do when you begin your preparation is to take a diagnostic test. So go online, type free GRE practice exam, take any random practice exam. Don't take the ETS official practice exams as your diagnostic test. You have to save those official ETS practice tests for later, once you've done some preparation and are now have some strategies to actually attempt the GRE well. That initial diagnostic test, take any random test, and it's just to see how the exam is and if you're able to do it or not, what sort of things that you need to focus on. So that's just the sort of initial thing that you do. After preparing for 2 or 3 weeks, then you should start looking at the ETS official tests, practice tests as a way to gauge your preparation. So there's the official ETS guide that has 2 free practice tests. There is this paper-based GRE practice test. So that's another practice test. There are these Power Prep online practice tests that are available on the ETS's website. So we have Power Prep 1 and Power Prep 2. These are the exact same type of exam questions, exact same structure, and even the interface that's going to be there for the actual GRE. So these are literally the exact exam that you're going to get when you're actually going to go to the center. So you should save these quite near the end. I would say you can take the Power Prep 1 practice test somewhere in the middle of your preparation so that, okay, you can see, okay, where you stand halfway through, and then one of them at the end. And now the important thing is you can find lots of practice tests online. That's not really the issue. There are lots of paid packages. You can get lots of practice tests, but it's very good to follow practice tests that are made from questions that actually appear from ETS. So there's this book called the GRE Big Book. This book has GRE questions that used to be asked in the 1990s. So back then it was all paper-based. So this sort of collection is there. Now the thing is, this has a lot of questions, but they're mostly outdated. Well, they're not outdated in the sense they still have the GRE type structure, but some things are different. So sentence equivalence is kind of different. Sentence completion is kind of different. The number of blanks is usually different. Reading comprehension used to be longer. So that really shouldn't affect you. If it's long, it's kind of shorter in the modern GRE. In the previous one, it used to be a bit longer. But using questions from this book to make your own practice test is a very good strategy to prepare for the GRE. You can literally make tens of or about 10 or 20 practice tests from the practice test questions that you have in this big book. So making your own practice test helps you get a lot more practice tests from which you can practice. And as we've discussed, practice tests are key to actually doing well in the GRE, because you have to have that focused concentration and practice over that 4-hour stretch to be actually able to do that in the actual exam. Now, while you're preparing for the GRE, it's good to keep an error log of, okay, where are you making mistakes? You can make a small Excel sheet in which you can put in questions that, okay, while I was attempting reading comprehension questions, I attempted these many questions, and of these many I got wrong. Quantitative, you can categorize it by different categories like geometry and arithmetic and statistics and things like that. And okay, see that, okay, I find that I'm quite weak in this one area. I'm getting a lot of good questions correct over here, but I'm getting some wrong over here. So keeping an error log while you're practicing helps you find where your weak points are. And making your own tests, as I said, it's a very good strategy. There's this other very good ETS test that they have over there called Power Prep Plus Online. But the thing with this exam is that this is paid and it's very, very expensive. So it's, well, it's good, but it's very expensive. So that's why I am suggesting over here that, okay, you can make your own randomized practice tests, and that's really useful. And it certainly helped me because I was doing that. So with that, I have the small preparation timeline over here. So the perfect time to prepare for the GRE is July. So it's mid-July right now. This is the perfect time because you really shouldn't be preparing for this exam for more than 2 months. If you prepare for this more than 2 months, then you'll not have time for the other things in your graduate application. You have so many other things left. So the first thing that you should do, you should take a diagnostic test just to see how you are at the GRE in your initial stage, and then review the strategies that are there for different types of questions. You have many different videos, you have many different things online which you can look at, and we'll certainly be discussing those for those different strategies. And then you should start with the ETS official practice material. That material is the best because it comes directly from ETS. And at the same time, while you're doing all this, you should be practicing your essays. So in a week, you can practice maybe 1 or 2 essays. You should be consistent with your vocabulary practice. So it's just an app. You can, in your downtime, whichever free time that you get, you can go through a list of 15 or 20 words. And reading is something which you do on the side. Just don't spend too much time on it, but it's still very important to do reading practice. Now, once you're about 3 or 4 weeks into your initial preparation, you should take the Power Prep 1 official GRE practice test. That will give you a good indication of how much preparation so far has been useful and how you're standing with the GRE right now. And from here on, you can move over to other sources. So you're probably done with all the GRE official material. So this is where paid packages come in. There are obviously a lot of other sources online. So you can look at those and prepare those more advanced sort of questions. But with that said, you should still keep practicing your essays, should still keep doing your vocabulary practice. And around this time is a good time because you're nearing the end of your preparation right now to review some of the more advanced strategies relating to quants, which I was discussing about. So there will always be 1 or 2 advanced questions. It's a good idea to know what type of questions they are and practice them if you are really aiming for a high score. And once September comes, September is the month in which you should take the official test. So once September rolls around, you should pretty much take all the 7 or 6 practice tests that you're going to take, and keep practicing from the official material and whatever paid packages that you have. And vocab practice never stops. So September really is the month in which you have to take the official GRE, because if you delay your GRE for October, then things become a bit more difficult for you. Because the thing with the GRE is that they take about 10 or 15 days for you to give your official results. And after that, they have to be sent to the university, so maybe another week there. So if you're planning to apply to US universities, the application deadline is usually either the 1st of December or 15th of December. That's usually what I've seen. So if you want your score to get there, then you have to take this exam before October begins, so that by the end of October, the scores can reach there. You should spend October and November on other things. You obviously have to take either the TOEFL or IELTS exam. You have to work on your SOP and other application materials. So taking the GRE at the end of September is, I think, the perfect time. It could be just before your mid-sem exams, or you could do something. You could arrange your exam date accordingly, right? And taking the GRE, delaying it to October, that would cause a lot of problems for you later on for these other things and scheduling things. So I wouldn't recommend taking the GRE after 1st October. But if you're short on time, you can still try it. But I'm just telling from my experience, even taking the exam at the end of September, that was about the perfect time. 2 months to do your SOP and these other things, that's pretty much perfect. So if I had less time, then I don't think I would have been able to do those SOP and those other things. So with that, I'll just like to conclude. The GRE is just an exam where you're preparing for pretty much everything related to grad school. So you're trying to develop confidence in your skills for grad school, and whatever weak areas you have, you can identify them through your preparation and work on them. That's how it works, right? There's a lot of strategy involved, so don't blindly go into the exam. You have to have a strategy for everything, plan through everything, how you're going to do the exam, and how much time you're going to spend for each question. These sort of things are important. Different strategies also require experimentation. So do experiment with different strategies. There are a lot of different things out there. So try different things and see what works for you. What may work for me might not work for you, right? But it's very important to stay consistent in your practice. You have to keep practicing, and you have to be consistent in your practice every day. It's very important to have a community or a group of people who are also preparing for the GRE, like you probably have over here, to be there and to work on this together, because feedback with individual peers is very important, especially when it comes to the issue essay. Maybe not so much for the other sections, you're doing them yourself, maybe asking for help here and there, but the essays are very important, and feedback on them really helps. And I can say that it really helps. It really helped me. Talking to just one person was really good and helpful. So having 2 or 3 people would be really good. And finally, practice tests are very, very, very important. They are very important. And you should take as many practice tests as possible, because these are really what really defines whether you'll do well on the GRE or not. So with that, I'll conclude this presentation, and I hope everyone was able to gain a lot from this, and I think we can move on to the questions now.